Hello, Sarah Steele. We're going to take a look at your Follow the Sun posting as well as your takeaway posting as well. So let's just jump right into it and go ahead and do a screen share here. So I've called up your Follow the Sun here, and this project is really all about um, applying the knowledge and the experience you had in the studio, exploring qualities of light, exploring dynamic composition, exploring the deconstruction of the subject. In other words, it's not bottles, it's shapes, stuff like that. So this project, where we're following the sun, we're out on location, is really about applying that kind of information and experience to a new set of variables. And the videos that I put out were really more about highlighting what the light looks like, what time of day it would be, and what you might look for as you're exploring these different areas. So let's take a look at what you have here in terms of your posting. Here we have midday, of course, and it looks like you are, certainly at the right time of day here. We can look at the way that the light is coming from, the direction the light is coming from. You're using broad lighting and short lighting. This first image is definitely short lighting. And as I had mentioned in the demo video, short lighting is a really good strategy when you're working at midday, because the light is coming from a pretty high angle, and so therefore your shadows tend to be more truncated. You usually have a real sort of bright light that's hitting the surface of things. So coming around to the other side of it, to where you're here and then the light is kind of out here, kind of aiming at wherever your subject is from the side and behind, it gives you a little bit more character, and it gives you a little bit more to work with in terms of the shadows, because otherwise the shadows are just going to be these short truncated things. And so this first image, where you're really, the highlight here is texture and repetition of color. The composition's a little muddy. There's not a whole lot going on here compositionally. This is more about a pattern in this image than anything else. Here we're getting more into a sort of dynamic composition, and it's a lovely image to be working with something so simple. Yet we're still having the short lighting. I can tell because the limbs here along this edge are dark. The light is coming from this direction. You got that cool bird. You're using the entire picture plane. This is a very effective use of light during the midday. The colors are popping. It's an effective image all around. This one is using some of the same strategies, but less effective. And the reason for that is we do have some business that's not really contributing. We've got this extra business over here, kind of thing. If this were a drawing, you would have not drawn that. You would have just included the lines within the image. Now, granted, as we've said before, you may not have even seen that based on the limitations of your viewfinder in the screen. But that said, the reason I feel like this image is much more effective than this image is basically the arrangement of the elements. This is very linear. There isn't a whole lot that's happening for us to sort of work off of. My eyes aren't moving in any particular way. Here, on the other hand, we've got these angles that are kind of leading us down, and then it kind of brings us back up again. You got these curves that are being interrupted by the bird. This is just a very dynamic composition. This one's much more static. This is more about, it's a picture of of flagpoles, and this is more about, this is a kind of arrangement that you are observing within the image. That said, the lighting strategies here, you're doing very well with it. This is a beautiful rendering of shallow depth of field, where you have deep focus here, right on the surface, and then it falls off very quickly after that. Excellent use of shallow depth of field. This one is a little less of that. If you got a little closer, we would have that sort of blur that kind of comes out at you like that, and then it falls off in the background. So this experiment in shallow depth of field is much more successful than this experiment. And then as we kind of work forward into your golden hour. Now, golden hour, these did get a little bit dark on you, and that is not uncommon, I suppose, where exposure starts to become a little bit more of a challenge. They're not necessarily dark in the sense that I can't see information. I would say they're dark in the sense that they don't have a luminescent quality to them. They don't pop in the same sort of vividness as some of your other images, particularly the ones you've done in the studio. That said, this is a really cool shot. If it was just a little bit different exposure, a little bit brighter, this is taking advantage of that shallow depth of field that we talked about. You've got repetition that's happening. The eye is kind of moving all around the page. Really works well. The good news is an image like this can easily be modified in Photoshop using digital technology to kind of enhance and bring out the luminosity again. We don't want to build that into our process where we're having to fix things, but this could be easily corrected in terms of it being a little too dark in Photoshop, some of that software. This again is a little dull, a little dark. It could have been the day, it could have been that you were working with the right time of day, but the light was maybe cloudy. And that really isn't giving you the kind of quintessential golden hour directional light that you normally would have. So that might have had something to do with it, the time of day that you were working. Wow, these are just beautiful, sort of arrangements. Now, these we would call static compositions. In other words, my eye isn't moving around the page. My eye is sort of corralled into one location. These are very graphic looking images, and a graphic designer would love it because it gives them a lot of leeway in terms of where they would put their information, like text or copy or headlines and things like this. I imagine this is about as close as you were able to get with your camera, but, coming in even closer would have been beautiful. This one does still lack a little bit of that luminosity, which again can be corrected quite easily in Photoshop. Let's kind of jump down into the twilight, which again, it got a little bit dark on you, but these should feel a little bit, sort of, I would call low key, not dark, but low key. This is just what we're talking about at twilight, and that is where the sun's gone down and it's still illuminating the sky. You can see the redness is coming from atmospheric dust and that kind of thing. The red you're seeing is glowing dirt, basically, that's floating in the sky. You probably recognize that this is a bit soft out of focus. It's hard to focus, under these conditions because it's dark and you don't have a lot of contrast to work off of. This is a really good idea. You're working with texture and you're working with color. This is an excellent subject to be working with. Again, I think it lacked a little bit of luminosity though in the end. This is also a really effective shot of motion. That's a good job of capturing the motion because we're getting a little bit of movement, but we're also getting like crystal clear shades of water. These again got a little bit dark. I'm surprised that so many of them are a little dark. It can easily be corrected, but we want to kind of make those adjustments as we go. The additional challenge of this project, as opposed to what we did in the studio all term, is that things are changing constantly out there. When we're in the studio, you have the light, you have your key light, you have your subject, you have you. The light and the subject weren't moving or changing. You could have that light there for 2 hours and you could continue to work with that light. That intensity is not going to move. The difference is when you're outside using sun as your key light, the sun's constantly changing. It's always moving. And so therefore you're having to adapt continuously and you're always having to adjust your camera settings and adjust what it is that you're looking at, because 10 minutes ago, the light was different than it is now, and it's going to be different in 10 minutes, still. So the reason this is a much more advanced project, even though we're still using the same tools, we're still using the same principles, is that things are changing and you can't control them. So that could have been a little bit why some of these images look a little bit dark, because that additional challenge can sometimes throw people for a loop and they're not adjusting their exposures quickly enough or adapting quickly enough as they go. See a lot of this area when we're looking at mixed lighting. Now, this mixed lighting, it looks like the light is a little bright toward the background, although I think you have the right idea where we're trying to find this balance. It's still, the sun is definitely up. I can see the sun is hitting the building back there. And so for this exercise, we were, you would have been better off if the sun was a little lower to where it had already set and it's twilight, yet we're incorporating the Christmas lights and stuff like that. So you probably wanted to wait just a little longer, which you do. By the time these images continued, you get to the blue hour moment there. These compositionally are still very sound. I see you're using the entire picture plane. The lights are not overwhelming the image. You got, in this image particularly, well, stop pointing, I'll just use the arrow because it might be easier for you to see what I'm looking at. Down in this area right in here, you've got the artificial light. Up here, you've got the artificial, the natural light. That's what we're looking to kind of exaggerate. And, you can push this using your camera settings to either shift it more warm or shift it more cool and stuff like that. This is more, again, a picture of light. Not as effective as some of the others where you were using the light as a compositional element. Again, in this one got a little bit soft on you, I think. Again, this area, I've seen this a lot, the neon alley, I guess is what it might be called, or some people call it that. But it's an excellent location for doing this kind of balanced lighting. Now, this is perfect. This is exactly what we're looking for. You nailed it on this one because you got great composition. You got a balance of the light where you got the daylight happening in the background. You got the artificial light coming on. This is just fantastic. This is a great image, Sarah. And this is what we were talking about. And I might even actually use this the next time I teach the class to describe what mixed lighting ought to be looking like, because you got just the right time. And the other images, while they have their effectiveness, don't quite hit it just quite on the head as this one does. And part of it has to do with the fact that it's changing constantly. This time of day, the light is shifting very quickly and you lose it. And so a lot of times if you were, out there and you're trying to capture this, you would need to come many times in order to get enough time under that particular lighting scenario. But congratulations on this one. This one's an awesome image. You nailed it. If I was to say, what's an example? I'd say this one would be it. Let's jump back over here and check out your final takeaway. See if I can find it here along there to see, here we are, Sarah Steele takeaway. All right, so final project, you did the 12 images to show what you've learned over the semester. A few students did this, and I'm glad. I give that option because some of you do. You want to, actually demonstrate, not just kind of look back and say, here's what I did, which is totally fine. But instead, you want to kind of go out and kind of explore. And, that option allows you complete and total freedom as to what you make the images of. You're just then trying to show what it is that you're interested in. In this case, some of this wildlife is really cool. This is a great image. Got a little soft. Again, I think maybe a tripod would have benefited you there, but the lighting is just quite beautiful. On it, that's a pretty intense stare down there as well. Excuse me, I didn't mean to have this over my face the entire time there, but I have felt a cough coming on as I'm talking. This is probably the third or fourth series that I've been looking at here. Look at this little guy. Now, again, when you start to work with these kinds of scenarios, the complexity compounds because you got this moment, this little guy's going to run away. The key to doing these kinds of images is to anticipate not where they are, but where they're gonna be. In other words, setting something up where you know eventually someone's going to come by, like a person or a squirrel or a cow, and then have the composition set up. Be prepared to adjust the exposure to get the exposure just right. There's a lot that goes into this kind of stuff. And there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of unknowns. But we call these things decisive moments. And what it's really about is being in the right place at the right time with the right camera settings. So it takes a lot of practice and it takes a lot of observation to be able to snap a shot that is compositionally sound, that has the element of character to it, the way this guy is. I mean, it's a beautiful portrait there. He's kind of giving it out one stare. His hands are kind of in. It's great. You can see the texture of the fur, which means you're close enough. It's just the lighting is just very broad and nondescript. And I think that if we had better lighting on this image, you'd have a solid shot. Here, although this image is slightly soft, it's being saved by this beautiful light. You see the direction of light, it's hitting, you got these highlights happening on the nose and on the face. It's just exquisite. This one is just sort of a wash in flat lighting. And, that's just an observation. This still could be an excellent image if we were to maybe incorporate some other things into it, like text, if this was used in graphic design. But as a portrait of an animal, that's great. I mean, if this is kind of the direction you're interested in exploring, definitely, continue to explore that. But just understand there's a lot of moving parts here to this. This, again, is a beautiful gesture here. This is great. The composition is a bit more nebulous than some of your others, but the light is fantastic. You've got this sort of light coming from maybe position 2, kind of coming from the front side there, giving you these beautiful shadows. There's this sort of ripple that's happening in the abstraction. But the composition really isn't all that exciting. You just sort of a duck in the middle of the image placed there. So you continually look to capture these images, being in the right place, the right time, the right composition. Nature photography like this requires a lot of shots. And in the old days, when you had to use film, you put a cartridge into your camera and you got 36 shots. Then you got to take that cartridge, spend more money to have it developed. That you had to be very careful. Nowadays, you've got a card you slide in there and you can take 1,000 photographs. So take 1,000 photographs when you're out here because there's so much that you can't anticipate that it's almost improvisation, where you have to improvise constantly to get just the right shot. These are all, this is beautiful. As you start to look at, and this is gorgeous, beautiful time of day, crystal clear. The composition is dynamic. You've got the lower third going on. You've got textures happening all over, the beautiful sort of reflection that's happening down in this is just an exquisite photograph all around. And this tells me that this is maybe kind of the stuff that you're interested in making images of. And so you're applying your knowledge to a location in a way here and in here that tells me that you're paying attention to everything. Here, you're trying to capture the gesture of the duck, and you can't pay attention to everything else because you're moving so much. So much is changing constantly. This, nothing's moving. You were able to set it up, tweak just a little bit this way or that way. It's fantastic. Portraiture, there are some skills that I could cover if I had more time to brighten up the image on his face, stuff like that. This is where an assistant would have really helped. Remember in the studio, when we took those white cards or even the silver cards and try to catch the light and bounce it back into the scene. That's what we want for this image so that we can see this gentleman's face and his eyes just a little bit better. If you had a card just out of the range of where the camera is, somewhere right over here, bouncing light, you see how light is hitting my hand, but bouncing the light from here back up into that face area where the brim of his hat is kind of shading his face, bouncing light up into there. this would have popped. And so those little things you'll start to discover as you continue to apply our learning to your photography and the things that you want to make images of. You know, I'm glad your classmates are kind of congratulating you here. I agree with much of what they're talking about, and I appreciate here where you're responding to it. That's great. Not, believe it or not everybody followed that, where they're responding to what other people are saying. I hope that you stay in touch with us. I know you're a nursing major. I know that you're not at all required to take these classes, but I do see that you've developed quite a sense of how to use your camera, how to manipulate light. You've done a fantastic job this term, and I'm very much interested to see how you respond to some other other areas of photography, like, maybe digital editing or printing or even video if it occurs to you. So thank you for taking a chance and coming over to the Department of Art and taking classes. And I hope you got a lot out of it, and good luck with your nursing career. And hopefully we'll see you sometime in 21. I'll see you all on my class list where you're thinking of taking more classes over here. So, all right, that is what I have to say about your imagery, and we will hopefully stay in touch with you. All right, bye-bye now.